Very first episode of the very first season of Let's Make a Game. This is a live cast series where I'm basically going to talk about my experience developing a video game of my own. Hopefully it'll be somewhat informative and maybe a little bit entertaining. I may have some people come on and chat and add some commentary to my work while I'm doing this. We're going to make these episodes fairly regular. I'd like to do maybe daily or weekly, I'm not sure what yet. And basically I'll spend about an hour or half an hour working and kind of discussing what I'm doing as I go through the process of making a game. So for this first season, I'm gonna make a game called On Edge, and this is a game I actually designed a few years ago for a Dream Build Play competition, which is a competition hosted by Microsoft for XNA games, so games for Xbox and PC. And I made this game over the summer during this competition, and I really liked it, but it didn't really go anywhere in the competition. Didn't win any awards or anything. But I think it's definitely something I wanted to basically remake and make it on a more stable platform. And also, I was hoping to shift it. It was a PC and Xbox game, but I think it'd be very well suited for tablet devices. And you'll see why in a second, because it's a pretty simple mechanic. Anyway, the game idea came from during that year. I think it's 2009. I was playing Plants vs Zombies. I was having a lot of fun with that game. And I thought it'd be great if this game were multiplayer, or at least if there's some sort of offensive mechanic in it, because most of the time you're playing, I mean, the whole time you're playing defensively. So you build your units, and the zombies come and attack your plants, and you hope to protect them from your house. But I was thinking it's really fun if this is a multiplayer, and you can actually send zombies out and attack your friend, while at the same time he's sending zombies out and trying to attack you, and you still have to build your defensive units, and basically it's a simple RTS kind of game, with but just the units are restricted to lanes, just like in Plants vs Zombies. And so that's where this idea came to be. So On Edge is a pretty simple game, but there's still a lot of work that goes into it, obviously. So let me show you here a quick mock-up I did of it. So this is just a 3D rendering of it. This is not in-game or anything like that. But this is the basic idea. So what you see here there's some units over here. There's basically a red team and a blue team, that's all it is, and they attack one another in these lanes, and at the back of each lane there is a missile. And so this is kind of equivalent to, they have the lawnmowers in the Plants vs Zombies, where as soon as the zombie hit, the lawnmower would run everything over and you get like another life. Well, there's no lawnmowers in this game, but this is basically the end of the lane. So as soon as you get over here, you're trying to destroy the enemy team's missile before they destroy all of yours. And so to do this, you build offensive units and defensive units. So these little artillery cannons back here, these are all defensive units. They don't move, but they sit up and they occupy an entire square. And then as units is close enough, they'll attack whatever units are inside of their lane. And then you can build defensive units. So these tanks right here are actually traveling across the map and you're start attacking the other team's units. And then as soon as they destroy all the other units, if they hit, they can start attacking the defensive units. And then eventually, if there's nothing else in their way, they'll attack the missile silo at the very back and hopefully destroy it. You win the game by destroying all of your opponent's missile silos before they destroy all of yours. And so it's a pretty simple game. There's no I guess micro strategy in this game. So all you can do is really build units, and you can only decide where to build them and when to build them. Those are basically the only two things you can do. And this was one of the main reasons I was thinking about targeting tablet devices, because simple game mechanics like this are very well suited for mobile devices. And this can be a very short game. It's a very simple, small area. If these game, I haven't really gotten into the point where we're testing out how long it takes to finish a game or what the average game time is. But if it's short enough, it'd be very well suited for tablet games, where you just pick it up, quickly play, jump into a multiplayer game, and just for a few minutes, spend some time playing this game. The multiplayer, though, will only be networked. So at the moment, I'm not considering supporting local multiplayer, just because I'm a bit worried about the interface. For tablet devices, you can see it where it's like you set down the tablet and the table and you sit around it, and one person on one side, one person on the other side. It may work out pretty well, but for now we're just going to focus on doing purely networked multiplayer, so you can only play against other devices connected on network or or 3G or whatever else. Okay, so there's a lot of challenges in the game. You see, it's a 3D game, so there's going to be some 3D modeling involved. We're going to have to worry about textures for that too, and some shading stuff and whatever else. And one important thing to know is that since we're targeting these tablet devices, it's really important that we keep keep the resources very low poly. I can't make them super detailed models, which is good because I'm not an artist by trade. I am a programmer, so it's not the best artwork in the world. But what's nice is that these low poly models kind of forces me not to be too fancy, and it will look all right because I'm trying to make the game efficient, not really look good because it is multiplayer. I'd like it to look decent, some sort of art direction, but they can be really blocky, kind of, not a lot of smooth edges on anything. Anyway, I'd like to flip through some designs for units. So basically what's been happening is, this is kind of late in the process. I've been working on this game for a few weeks now, and so a lot of what I've been trying to do is set up the multiplayer because there's some issues with setting up the networking code for a game like this, because you have to make sure that the game states are synchronized, and if there's a lot of units on the field, it's very important that whatever method we use for game state synchronization, we keep it very simple and lightweight so we don't take a lot of bandwidth up, because it can be hard if there's a lot of units. They can't all just send their positions and their whatever data to each other, because that just takes a lot of bandwidth, and as soon as the game state goes out of sync, the game is basically shot, right? You're not playing the same game anymore. So these are important considerations I've been looking at, and basically what I've been doing is trying to set up not really a prototype, but just a working first copy of the networking proof of concept to myself that this will actually work, and I built up a nice little base starting point for this. Anyway, first I'd like to go over some concepts of what I would like things to look like. So these are I've just been working on recently. I've actually been doing I've been doing some artwork already for this, and a lot of these are taken out. So here's the first chassis type. So basically the idea is that the units in this game will be separated between a chassis and a weapon. So there's all very modular. So what you can have is you can take a hover tank chassis, so just the hover tank part, no gun on it or anything like that. And then you can attach different types of guns. So there may be a laser cannon, there could be a Gatling gun, there could be a rocket launcher, something like that, and you can attach them. And that's how new units will be built up. So in the game, we don't really give the option to play. We don't give the player the option to build these units. But what we like to do is, just for simplicity's sake, we can make a bunch of different unit combinations just by having a set of weapons and a set of chassis. So here's the first chassis. This is the Spider chassis, Mark 1. So I was considering doing multiple versions of this. So it can be like an upgraded Mark 2 version that maybe has another set of legs or something else. Anyway, this is actually this is something I designed. I tried to do a remake a while ago of this game, and it's the design I came up with for this. And so it's pretty simple. It's low poly. These are pointed legs. You can literally see the polygons that are going to take up this shape. Very simple. Has this rounded part in the middle, and basically I wrote here there's dual weapon mounts. And so what you can do is we can put a cannon on here, like some sort of weapon up here that mounts on the top of this. But you could also mount one down here that's hanging upside down and still shoot at units in front of it. And so I'm just kind of I made a little concept art to be kind of fun and silly, and it kind of keeps me inspired to work on stuff. So this design has already been down, but I haven't modeled this one yet. I have some notes up here. It's light and fast and something like that. So it can't take a lot of damage, but it's very quick or something like that. Maybe it's hard to hit because they're so small. We could play different things like that. So the next thing here's the Art-1. So this is the Artillery Mark 1, first version artillery unit. It's pretty simple. Again, it's low poly. Look at this. It's very square, basic. There's some roundedness here. So obviously this won't be a smooth, perfect cylinder when we model it, but we'll keep it low poly. Pretty simple design. And basically what you can do is you can take one of these then and just mount it onto any chassis. So you can put it on the hover tank chassis or the Spider chassis that we saw earlier. And you'd have an artillery cannon on top of a Spider chassis for whatever reason. And here's our Gatling gun design. I've been having actually some fun because I recently purchased a drawing pen and tablet set, and so I've been picking up how to do drawing and making these in GIMP, and it's actually been a lot of fun. And I'm not one for art, but it was kind of fun to play around with. I think that's right. So here's the Gatling gun. Has obviously a lot of barrels to it, but it's very simple. Again, you can mount multiple of these on the chassis or whatever you want. So you could have a Gatling and an artillery unit or whatever else. Of course, again, this won't be for the player, but this will be for me when I'm designing these things. If I want, maybe there should be a unit that needs more firepower, so let's strap on another Gatling gun or something, and that'll help deal with the balance and whatever else. Then here's the first air unit that I've designed so far. It's very simple. It's basically like a weapon mount that's attached to a helicopter, some blades. And so here we see just simple design. There's some propellers on it, very low poly, very simple. I'm trying to keep that in mind when I do the concept art as well. Like, I'm not trying to make the concept art look really fancy. If I could, I can't really do that anyway. But again, keeping very simple designs so that it will look like this somewhat in the game. And anyway, so that's it. So here, you notice that the weapons that we mount onto it will be hung upside down. Basically, they'll be seeing from that, and then they'll just fly around and carry this gun or something. So this is the Heli Mark One. Pretty simple stuff. Here's the hover tank. There was some early design. You saw that mock-up. I kind of had an early hover tank design. It's very basic. It's it's just inspired by a standard Abrams tank, whatever. It's there's not a lot to it. Basically, all it is there's no tread on it. The original reason I had hover tanks in my dream build place, the very first, I guess I'm going to call it a prototype now. So the prototype had a hover tank in it. And the reason I did this was because I was not looking forward to animating or making animated textures for the hover tank for tank tracks, and also worrying about animating. If you notice here in the tiles in the world, they're actually like literally tiles. They have a little divot in between each one. I was worrying about, like, what if I had to animate and make it look like it goes over that. So I thought, why not just make it a hover tank? Animation is very simple. It's a bob up and down. It can just float along and it looks nice. And so I was trying to save myself some time by doing that. And so I just kind of stuck with it. And I'm not an artist. I don't have the funds to hire an artist or anything like that. And so I'm going to stick with this right now. What I'm thinking of is adding some sort of particle effect, or maybe just a light underneath that makes it look like it's hovering. What's kind of difficult here is that I have a blue highlight here, and we're dealing with there's two colors. There's a red team, there's a blue team in this game, and basically we can't really utilize those two colors for any sort of effect that's shared between units. Now I could, it's very possible to add a light underneath the hover chassis that is just the color of the team. That's what I've been doing, actually. You'll see in a second when I show you the current version of the game. They'll shoot lasers. The laser cannons, actually their laser color is basically, it is the team color they shoot. And I may keep that because basically it's like a lot of colors I want to use are red and blue, and I can't really use those outside of, I can't have a red unit that has blue underneath it because it looks kind of weird. Just something that's kind of annoying, but I have to put up with, but it's not too bad. I'm missing a picture here. Basically, I have one more of the laser cannon. Just not sure what happened to that. Alright, so here's the... Oops, there we go. Here's the laser cannon. This one's actually in GIMP right now, but that's okay. And so you see it's pretty simple. Again, low poly. It has a little charge pack on the back, which is the most detail it's going to have. It's a laser Mark 1 in case there's a Mark 2 later, I don't know. Up here I put a few notes about it. It's short cooldown, so it shoots very fast, low damage though, but very high accuracy, so it's unlikely to miss. So I haven't made a lot of heavy hitters, so the artillery cannon so far, that's pretty heavy hitter, and I gotta design some new chassis and things to go along with this. One unit was one of my favorites in my prototype game. I can't remember what I called it. I called it something with a fish name, but it's basically a blimp, and it was inspired from the Red Alert 2, I think Red Alert 2, yeah, Red Alert 2 blimps that just drop bombs from the Soviets, and so it's just this big blimp that drops bombs, and it has a big propeller on the back, and I may recreate this for this game. It'd be kind of fun. The problem is it tended to be a big unit, and depending on what viewpoint we're taking in this game, it can obscure what's going on underneath it. And so I don't plan on this game to be completely top-down view, but it does restrict us with those units. We can't have like huge units that are in the air because they tend to block the ones below it. So that actually brings me to an important point: is that in this game there are actually two types of units, right? So we have or I guess it's three types of entities that you can build. You can build a structure type entity, so that's the one that doesn't move, but it actually occupies a space. And then you can build the ground type entities. These are ground units that move and attack, they're offensive. And then there's also the air type entities. And these, I don't think there'll be any air type structures, maybe, but I doubt that. But air units, what's nice about them is they take up, imagine it's just like there's another layer on top of each lane, and they'll take up that lane. So what happens is you can still build air units on top of structures, because they'll actually appear up in the air, and so that'll be fine. They can do that. You can also build them on top of other units. But what happens with these, when you build a ground structure inside of a square, that square you can no longer build things there. So as long as that structure exists, you can't build ground units on top of the structure. Obviously, they'll just start intersecting with one another, and that doesn't work. But there won't be a restriction on building units in tiles where there's already a unit inside of the tile. They'll overlap for a second, and they'll spread out because units will not want to stay next to each other. There's a certain range, they'll try to avoid collisions with one another, but what will happen is, say I build a unit here on this, if I build a unit here on this this tank right here, I want to build another tank right where he is, I can do that. What will happen is the one that I just built will kind of pause and wait until this unit, this hover tank, keeps moving forward and gets out of the way, and then he'll start moving. But it won't prevent you from building, just because I feel like that's kind of an annoying thing to deal with. Is if you want to just you need two units. You see a tank coming in, and you already got a tank back here. It's like, well, I need one back here too to defend, and let me just build another one. And you can do that. You can just build more tanks. And also another thing, gameplay-wise, to point out is that they tend not to, just like in Plants vs. Zombies, units will not tend to shoot outside of their lane. So even if it has a turret or something that spins around, it will only shoot for units in front of it. That is, unless it specifically is made to do that. So there may be some units where they can shoot in the adjacent lanes or maybe across diagonals or something like that. But that is that'll be that'll be a specialized unit, much like in Plants vs. Zombies. You could, you had the basic pea shooter, and then you could upgrade them to do the tri-headed one, where it'll shoot in 3 different lanes at once. Same kind of idea here. We're gonna lock it down so you're really defending on one lane at a time. But if you really need specialization, you can build the special units to defend multiple lanes. All right, so that's the basic idea so far. Let me now talk about the tools that I'm going to be using to build this game. Alright, so first thing first, I'm building this game using Unity. So if you're not familiar with this, Unity is a fantastic game engine that has a free version, and basically the real magic of Unity is that it builds on multiple platforms with using the same code base. So I can write my game here, test it on Windows, I could deploy it to Mac, I could deploy it to Android and iOS, and so iOS being iPads, and Android tablets and whatever else. So it's really great because I don't have to change my code. It's all using the same exact code. Another nice thing for me personally is that it uses C#, and I'm fairly comfortable with C#, and also you can use JavaScript as well for scripting. And so 2 languages I'm very comfortable with, and so it's a very natural fit for me. So this is the free version of it. There's no license restrictions, so there's no you can't. I mean, you can sell it as much as you want. They won't charge you anything. It's not like if you're familiar with UDK, which is the Unreal Development Kit, it's a free version of the Unreal Engine, which is fantastic. And their only restriction is that if you make over some X number of dollars, I can't remember what it was, some figure, then you start paying a percentage back to Unreal for using their tool for free, basically. With Unity, though, it's they have a free version, but they also have a professional version. The professional version, I think at the moment, is $1,500, which actually, considering all the features they give you, that's a pretty reasonable price. The Pro version kind of unlocks some things with the base free version, so there's some things you can't do here, like there's no dynamic lighting, no shadowing or anything like that. You can't do that in the free version. If you want that, you have to upgrade to the Unity Pro version. There's a lot of other things they have too. I can't name them off the top of my head, but maybe in the future I'll be upgrading, but for now this will suit me just fine. One thing to note though is that with the free version of Unity, I cannot just develop for the tablets. I can't just deploy it to the tablet for iPad or an Android tablet. You have to buy basically a license to do that, so I think it's like $400 or something at the moment. And I can buy these licenses, and then I have to buy $400 for the Android and $400 for the iOS, and then with that, if I have those, then I can then deploy the game out to those devices. But for now, I'm going to stick with the free version, just deploy on Windows for now, play around with it while I'm developing. Once it's just finished and polished and ready to go, the nice thing about Unity is all I have to do is go buy that license, and then I can deploy to iPad and Android. And basically I hopefully won't have to change anything. Maybe it had to be some minor performance issues, like as long as we keep that in mind as we're developing, there won't be too big an issue down the line. But I can at least for now know that my code will work on there. I don't have to worry about changing anything. And so it's gonna be really nice in the end. You know, maybe a week's or months worth of effort in the very end to change it around, but probably not even that. Okay, so Unity is the game development or game engine of choice. Also, I guess I didn't point this out. Right here, this is the Unity editor. This is the world editor for the game. Right now, you can't really see much here. This is the viewport for the world. I have a camera here and a camera here and a light here. Currently in this game, though, on Edge is the game. There's not really levels for it, right? There's no. I don't have to go out and design a terrain and lay down, put entities here and here and here or whatever else, because the game is basically the entire world is constructed at runtime. So when you fire up the game, it builds the tiles, does whatever, and then the player chooses where to put units. He says, I want to put a tank here or whatever here. That's why this world looks so blank right now. There's really nothing here. What I do have is some terrain, though. This will probably be disabled in the later version. And actually, it's I forgot I have the fog turned on, so you can't really see anything. But if you see the silhouette out here in the background, there are some mountains, and this will definitely be disabled for tablet builds because it's pretty high poly. I may do something simpler and give it a nice 2D background or something. But I was just messing around with making it look as much like the mock-up as possible. Okay. So that takes care of the engine and the editor, so I don't have to worry about making an editor, which is nice, even though I don't really need one for this game. For artwork, there's two main tools. Blender, I think, would be the obvious choice here. So if you're unfamiliar with Blender, which you probably aren't if you've been developing games at all on your own, Blender is the free 3D modeling and animation and UV editing software, and it even has a built-in Blender game engine if you really want to develop your game in Blender. It's really full-featured. It has it's a fantastic thing. Previously to using Blender, I've only learned Blender in the past couple of weeks, and before then I've always used educational version of 3ds Max, and because I started a long time ago using Gmax, which is a free version of it, and that's where I first learned about 3D modeling. And I've always used 3ds Max, and then I've heard of Blender. I knew about Blender, and I tried it one day, and it hurt my head because there's just a lot going on. It's kind of a different workflow from Max. The interface is it's very much different. It's hard to really translate to until you really sit down and try it. It's not something you just pick up and know what you're doing with, which is really common for 3D modeling programs. I'm not bashing on Blender at all. It's a really fantastic thing, and so I started watching some tutorials and I figured out the workflow. And once you get into the workflow, it actually you figure it out very fast. Like you'll kind of pick it up and just keep your browser open so you can Google for things that you need to find. Anyway, the great part is it's free, and you really can't beat that because there's no restrictions. You can use all the things you create and sell them or whatever else you want. And it's just a fantastic product. We have animation, editing, and it's robust. I really have not had problems with it crashing or anything. The big thing with Blender, though, is you will be, like, when you first learn this, you will have a hard time doing things, the basic things, like I want to make a cube, let me extrude a face, whatever else. You'll have a very hard time doing that, especially if you come from a different platform, so 3ds Max or Maya or something. And you're not familiar with the interface because it's kind of different. There's a lot going on, and it's very hotkey reliant. So you'll get very used to having your hand on the keyboard, switching between all the tools, and you'll figure it out pretty fast. But what's nice is that when you are used to the workflow and you kind of know what you're doing, especially if you're a programmer like myself, whereas like I don't spend a lot of time in these artwork tools, it's fun once you get used to the hotkeys. So it's like I know that G will allow me to translate the unit. If I right click, it will reset it. If I left click, it will actually move it. Simple things like that. Rotate. I know I can rotate, but if I restrain it to an axis, you can type a key to restrain to the axis. And once you get used to those hotkeys, it becomes very natural, and it's actually very fast. And I've just enjoyed it a whole lot. Like I can't imagine. I picture myself going back to 3ds Max, and I have a hard time just because. I was so reliant on the mouse. It's like I'm using the interface, I'm clicking on buttons and stuff. It's a lot slower, but now I feel like it's very fast, and it's actually really fantastic. And one of my favorite features that I've just noticed, which is really helpful for non-artists like myself, is there's a texture paint. So what you can do is actually go in here and paint on your textures directly. So I have my object here. What I can do is paint on it, and it will project the paint. And it's actually, if I go over here to the UV edit layout, here's the texture that I'm painting. You notice over here it's painting, and it knows where to paint it because of the UV layout of the object. And that's a really cool feature that I absolutely love, and it helps me a lot because one thing I do not like doing is, I'm not an artist, and it takes me a long time to get the UVs laid out, and I'm not good at like taking that and putting it into GIMP and then drawing in GIMP, and so it's very difficult for me. If I can just paint on directly on the surface, it just takes that much of the edge off, which is really nice. And that actually brings me to GIMP. So GIMP is our 2D imaging editing image editor, I guess, that we're going to be using. So for any artwork, any texture work that has to be done, it will be done in GIMP. Again, it's a free tool, which is fantastic. It's basically your free Photoshop. Has basically all the features of Photoshop. I've struggled with a few things doing some things that I wish were a little easier with the interface, but overall I'm learning it, and it's not one of those things where it's like, keep your browser open, just Google stuff. Like, plenty of people use it. It has a large user base, just like Blender, and you can find what you need. And basically, for my purposes, it does everything I need. I'm not a big Photoshop junkie. I never really spent time in Photoshop, so this gets the job done for me. And for the game, this is not a hugely complex game in terms of artwork. It's very simple, and so this works well for me. It suits all my needs. Another thing is that it works really well with the pen and tablet thing, the Wacom, Wacom something, drawing tablet I used, and this works just seamlessly with that, and as does Blender. Blender works pretty well. It's not as good at detecting pressures, though, I've noticed, because there's a pressure. The pen pressure is really the biggest selling feature of these pen and tablet devices, because it allows you to, it's almost like you're drawing with a pencil and actually shading things in. But Blender works really well with it, but GIMP works just very well. It's basically what you want with GIMP, and it's been really nice for me to be able to quickly draw out these concepts right here in GIMP. It's been great. Okay, so that takes me through, I guess, artwork. So one thing you're probably wondering about is, what about sound? So sound is a problem I have yet to solve. Currently, I have two tools. The one, I haven't worked on sound too much, and it's kind of a thing I'll get to later, because I'm not too concerned about incorporating it into the workflow, because it's basically, you at the end, you have a WAV file or an MP3 file, and you're just going to play it. So it's not too big of a deal, like proof of concept wise, but one tool I have found should be kind of fun, and so just worth mentioning. It's called SFXR, so Sound Effector, I guess is what it's short for. And some guy made it for a competition a while ago. I don't know, I can't remember the guy's name, but he released it for free, and it basically allows you to make a variety of, they're all randomly generated sounds, but for a variety of applications. So it's mostly for, they're kind of low res sounds, the 8-bit chiptunes kind of sounding game things, because they're kind of for those kind of games. And so I don't know, it was really fun because I made a little laser sound that I'm using in my game right now for the laser shots, and it works really well. But there's this game's gonna require a lot of different sounds, and so I'll have to come up with something. Maybe just using Audacity, which is a free audio editing tool that works really well. I may have to just make my own sounds. I'm not sure. I may end up purchasing a set of sounds. I really don't know about prices or anything, so I'm trying to keep this as low cost as possible because I don't want too much development overhead besides all the time I spend doing this. But yeah, so that takes it to sound and music. Again, hopefully I could find some composer, someone. Yeah, I always see people posting on Reddit or other game development forums about they're offering their services for X amount of dollars for whatever. I may look into one of those, or I have some friends that are musicians that may be willing to help out. I'm not sure though. So that's something to think about way down the line, though, because right now we're focused on basically content creation at this point. So let me show you now what we have working. So what I'll do here is set up, I have to show two clients here because it's multiplayer, and I have not coded a really proper way of doing local multiplayer for testing. I really should do that, but it's not going to happen. So let me shift over here to a different view. Okay, so you're seeing something wrong. Oops, that's what's wrong. I need to disable the terrain here. Okay, so basically you're seeing two windows here. This would be one client over here, and then here is another client over here. So these are two instances of the game running. What we see here, the gray, what's going on here, this is actually a replay of the game being played back. And this is just the latest game that was played. I've already implemented this. Basically, every command that you execute when you're playing the game gets saved to a file, and then it just saves that file when the game's closed, and then when you open it back up, it loads the latest save file and just replays the game so you can kind of see what happened last. Now let's actually jump into a game. So what I'll do is I'll host the game over here, so I can click this host game button. Then over here on this other client, I can click join game. It's going to find it, click join. Then over here, and just click play to start the game because it's found all the players. Click play, and the game starts. So on this screen, I am the second person to join the game, so I'm the client, really. So there's not really a host in the client, but there is. So it's not in the sense where there's an authoritative server. So there's not a host who knows the exact game state, and the client is just sending, commands to him saying, "Can I move here? I'm moving here now. Where's everyone else?" It's more peer-to-peer structured, so that they send commands to each other, and then the game executes in the exact same manner on both clients. I've heard a lot of terms for this. I think the common term is lockstep multiplayer. The idea is that we have to keep the simulation, so the game state on both of these games has to be exactly the same. But all we're doing in each thing is sending over the commands that the player is issuing. So when I click on this tile, let's say I'm going to build a tank here. I click there. What happens is the tank, I send the command saying I clicked here to build this tank here in this tile. That exact command gets sent over to the other player over here, and the game says, okay, at this time I'm going to build the tile there. And so what happens, I'm going to build the tank there. So then what happens is basically both games at the exact same time created the tank right there, and then the game state basically just keeps going because the game logic itself, everything within the game is completely deterministic. So all movements, we always know, as long as we know when exactly this tank spawned, all the movements will be the same in both objects, in both clients. Who knows, there's a difference with the turret rotating, but that's not really an issue because that's kind of animation based. But everything that's like important to the game logic is completely deterministic. So I can build 3 tanks over here, and then on this client I can build 3 tanks over here, and they'll shoot at one another, and shoot each other and blow up. But you notice that on both clients, these 3 won out. The 3 blue ones actually won. If I build one there, and I can go back here and build more. The trick is that as long as I keep sending the same commands to one another, the game plays exactly the same. What's important about this is how a lot of RTSs work, and this is all of this technique came from a very famous in the game development world paper called 1500 Archers by one of the developers of Age of Empires. When he's working on the multiplayer for that game, he's making the multiplayer back when we had our 56K modems, and it was very slow internet connection speed. And if you have just a ton of units on the field, you can't program the networking like it's an FPS game. So in first-person shooters like Halo or Gears of War or whatever else, I guess Gears of War is not first person, but it's all the same. What you do is you kind of send your game state to the other players and to the host, and the host says, all right, here's where everyone else is. What are you doing now? Oh, you shot that guy. Okay, let me see if that was right. Yeah, you actually hit him. Now he's dead. And it sends, basically, you're communicating. Each unit in the world is communicating their state, their position, what way they're looking, what they're doing. Are they shooting? Are they standing? Are they jumping? Whatever else to the host, and the host sends that out to other clients. The problem is in an RTS like Age of Empires or StarCraft for that matter. There's a lot of units. So imagine a StarCraft game where you have, it's 4-on-4 and everyone's maxed out. That's a lot of units, 200 units per person, not to mention all the structures and whatever else in there that don't count toward the unit count. You can't have that many units or that many objects in the world taking up bandwidth, sending data to one another about their position and their action, because it wouldn't work. It'd be so slow. You have rubber banding everywhere, units would be flying around the field. It would just be ridiculous. It'd be kind of fun to see, just to see what it would do, but it just wouldn't work. So I took this approach, the lockstep program approach, which is how they solve the issue in Age of Empires, and StarCraft uses the same technique, where basically the only thing that's sent to each other is the builds. They say, hey, I click the unit, I wanted to build a Marine at this barracks, that gets sent out to all the clients. It says, okay, this guy's going to build in the next time step. He's going to build this. And so what happens is the game is separated into discrete chunks of time. So there'll be like every 200 milliseconds or something is a time chunk. And what happens is you build up a buffer and saying, okay, he said at the next time step that he's going to do this. So in 200 milliseconds, I better build this marine here because everyone else will have built that marine there. And then what happens is the game state across all these clients, it looks exactly the same because they knew at that time step and that exact time. If they know a time step, they know exactly what time that should happen. Then the units will be built and the game will play out the same. Another thing that's important about this, and what that affords us, is that the only thing you send over is commands. So you're not sending, as soon as that unit's built, he's kind of done, right? He doesn't have to send his position all the time because he knows, oh, I'm going to build a unit, so he'll pop out here, and so it'll be there. Then when you select a unit and you say move here, that command gets sent everywhere. So it says, hey, he said to move this marine here. And everyone will know, okay, he said move that marine there, so there's that. Let me move all the marines there. And so it'll move that marine everywhere else on all the clients. One thing that's very important, that's really the difficult thing about this kind of networking setup, is that the game state has to be deterministic. And by that, what that means is that we can't have any errors in the logic. There can't be any fudging between clients. And one big area that can cause a problem is floating point calculations, because these are not floating point calculations are not deterministic. There is always some error. If you've done any programming, you'll always come across a case where you're trying to find, you subtract two floating point numbers that should technically be the same, and it comes out to not be exactly 0. It's just a very, very small number. It'll be like 10 to the negative whatever. And why is that not 0? It should be 0. Well, that's because there's a little bit of fudging that's going on in the floating point calculations. It's just not perfectly accurate. And that can really cause a lot of problems when you're developing a game. And one thing in particular is in physics engines. So Unity comes with the physics engine, and that's one thing we simply cannot leverage in this game. We cannot depend on the physics engine to drive the game state. We can use it to do simple things, like if I have a tank explode, I can have like chunks of debris fly off of it and use the physics engine to handle all the collisions and whatnot. That's because that's not part of the game state. We don't really care where that debris chunk landed. It doesn't have to be exact. And so in the very first version, when I was messing around with this lockstep stuff and trying to figure out how it worked, I had basically a client and a server where you click a button, you could build cubes and you could build spheres and whatever else, and it would work for a little bit. They'd be in the same synchronization state, so you'd see there'd be like a stack of 3 cubes on both clients, and then all of a sudden, as soon as you click the next sphere, it's like it would roll just a little few degrees the wrong way on one client. All of a sudden, the whole thing would just kind of like butterfly effect would just go way out of whack. You'd see on the client over here, he'd just be, cubes would be everywhere on the ground, and over here they'd still be stacked up perfectly or something like that. And so that's something you can't afford. And I thought I addressed this problem when I was originally writing the code for updating all these entities and stuff. And I'd be playing, I had it kind of all set up, did a lot of work on it, I was testing it out. And I did something exactly like this. I built just like, 20 or 10 units on each side. And I'd have them fight each other and be like, oh wow, it's working, look at them, they're actually building at the right time, and they're showing up and they're shooting each other. And then all of a sudden, one would be dead. So this red guy would be dead here, but over here he'd still be alive in this client. And so, and then I realized there's a problem in my code, and it ended up being wasn't using fixed time steps properly, and I was not. There's just some timing issues basically, and it would get very frustrating because I did make these tiny tweaks, and I figure out, oh no, his movement's not using our synchronized time step. He's using the wrong time step. He's using this timer instead of this timer, and so it was kind of a pain. But it looks like I've gotten to the point where it works very well. Obviously, these aren't hugely complex scenes, but everything does work out, and I've tested a lot more than this, where I've just done a ton of units. And what's really nice is that since I've implemented this replay system, I can now just very easily load up the exact same game that happened previously and make sure it continues to play out the same way. And if it doesn't, that's how I can really run my tests. So actually, let me show you here. So now what happens, if I start this game up again, it's going to show that game that I just did, which will be kind of slow because I didn't really do anything. What I'm going to do here is just for fun, open up MonoDevelop. So what we can do is, in Unity, to program, it comes packaged with this IDE called MonoDevelop, which is a popular C# IDE, so integrated development environment. I'm assuming you're familiar with some programming stuff, but basically allows us to quickly program. Oh, sorry, let me switch this. There we go. So it allows you to is how you what you're going to program in basically. And what I can do is in my code's a little messy right now, but in my replay game handler, I have this replay multiplier. It's kind of fun. I can set this to, let's say, 4, and basically this is a fast forward. All it does, which is kind of neat, is that it runs the it sets the time scale, the Unity time scale, to a faster value. So now if I go back here and I click play, it's gonna notice the particles are going a lot faster, everything's moving a lot faster, and then hopefully what happens is, once I was done talking during that whole thing, I didn't really do anything the whole time, but you'll see that units will start appearing and they'll start moving a lot faster, which is really nice because all I had to do was, set this multiplier and set the Unity timescale. There's a built-in timer to Unity, just speed it up. I can also slow it down if I wanted to, and this all works just fine. And so what's nice about this is that I can watch replays and the game will just keep going on, and I can watch exactly what happens. There's what happened. Those 3 units lived, and then I built some more to fight back. And there's a unit. There's just a little replay. I made it gray just for fun. Probably what I'm gonna do is in the menu. What I'd like to have is when they fire up the game, it loads up a replay and it shows the replay going on. I'll have like a little filter at the top, so it's like it's grainy or something. I'm not sure that I'm gonna go with this yet. There's not really a set design I have for the menu system just yet. But anyway, replays work. And one thing I was playing around with, or I haven't really played around with it, but one idea I had was to do like a replay. I'm not sure how this would work, but basically if you lose the game, or if you win the game, it doesn't really matter, you can replay against the opponent. So you'd be like, alright, what if I was playing with my friend earlier, and he just beat me, and just destroyed me. He did this great defense, and I couldn't beat it. So let me try, what you can do is actually play the replay back, but instead of playing just the replay, you're actually playing the game, but only your opponent's commands are being sent in, not your commands. So then what you can do is he'll build the same exact build, and then you can build up your offense to possibly break it or something. The problem is that is obviously that the opponent's commands a lot of them are responsive to what you did in the game. So if you build a tank there, obviously he built a tank there, so you can get away with that and still win. But maybe it would help if you wanted to like fight their defenses or something. Anyway, what we're seeing also, I guess I forgot to mention this, is that we're seeing the modular design for the this is another nice feature of Unity Editor, by the way. You can pause the game at any time, which is awesome, and it just pauses. And I can take any unit and inspect it and see what's going on. So you see all these Hover Laser 2 clones. I can select them and see what's going on, select the chain gun, whatever else. I can also edit them, so if I wanted to, move him up, he can be up in the air now when I start the game again, but I think he'll move back down. Anyway, you'll notice that this is an example of the modular design I have for the chassis and the weapons. So basically what happens is there's no stand, there's no turret for this chain gun yet, but there will be eventually. Basically what's going to happen is you can see that I have a laser cannon and chain gun attached to the same hover chassis. This is how I'm planning extending. All I have to do is really attach these, because Unity takes advantage of a actor component architecture, where it's basically you attach components to various actors, and those components drive the logic of the game. So what I can have is this is basically a weapon. This is this chain gun weapon, and it has a script attached to it which handles its logic to like find things and shoot at things, and it really doesn't care about the chassis. All the chassis does is, since it's attached, this actor here, the gun actor, is actually attached as a child to this chassis. As long as we move the chassis has some logic script attached to it, and it'll just move forward and do whatever. The gun component just say, hey, am I nearby a unit now? I am, shoot it. It doesn't really care that it's on a chassis. It doesn't care that it's being moved. It doesn't handle its movement. It just knows I'm at some position. Is something close to me now? Can I shoot it? And if it's in range, it'll shoot. And it's also nice is I can add these lights to the transforms of the actual objects. So if you notice that here's the laser object, laser 1. It has a base, which is the stand, and then it's the actual gun element. The gun element is what actually rotates, and then I can have this barrel transform as well, and I've attached to that a light component. And this light component turns on and off when it shoots a laser, which is just kind of a nice feature. That works pretty well. And then this this barrel thing is just an empty object inside a Blender, and so Unity will take in the Blender exact hierarchy in Blender, and you can just use it exactly how you would in Blender, it's been really nice. that's another feature of Unity that I've really enjoyed, is that it has, you can normally when you're working on an engine like this, or anything, you make your model in 3ds Max or something, or Maya, and then you export it into a common format like FBX or something. What Unity does is it allows me to actually import Blender directly. I think behind the scenes it's actually turning it into an FBX, but it handles all the exporting and importing from Blender files. So all I have is my single Blender file. I don't have an FBX object at all. I don't have to worry about, oh, I need to save and now export to FBX correctly, and if I screw up that exportation, something's going to happen and whatever else. It works really well. I just have my Blender file and I edit, make some changes, and then click save on the Blender file like I would in Blender, and then all of a sudden it'll be updated in the game here. So actually watch this. So here's the hover tank, right? So let me go to the models. Let me open up the hover model. I just double click it. If I double click it, it knows to open up Blender. So here's the actual object in Blender. Now, what if I go in here and I change to object mode or edit mode? And this is just the mode where you edit the geometry. So I can select, let's say I select this guy. If I drag him up and drag him out, this big obvious change. And now I just click save. I'm saving it like any other object. Pop back here into the game. Now all of a sudden, they have this big bumps on them already. It already imported and brought it directly into the game. I unpause the game, they all have that weird modification. And that's just one of the cool features about Unity, is like you just make edits on the fly, and like I just could not imagine if I was writing this game engine from scratch, it would just be such a pain, and I would never have a feature like that. I would just, be like, well, you gotta build all your assets and then load them, and then they're not gonna change. But Unity just like, no, I'll upgrade them and I'll make them look good and make sure that they're exactly what you wanted. And so that's just a really cool feature to me. It's just like that's the best. Like if I'm looking at this, like zooming up here, I'm like, oh man, that needs to have a giant point on the front. I can just do that without a problem. So Unity is very cool, and I've been just super happy using it, and it's been just a blast because this is all free software. Like I just feel so spoiled because like all this free software that works really well, integrates together just excellently, and has made this has been, I think, literally 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, and I mean this is after my own work, so this is my free time and just some mostly on weekend work, and so it's been great. Like just so fast. Like I think the slowest stuff has been really modeling stuff. Like it has not been a hindrance to actually program everything. Another feature I forgot to mention is that there's actually a mini map up here, and you can actually click on this. I may not leave this in here. I kind of don't like it, but I think what I'll do is give the player the option to go from this orthographic top view, bird's eye view kind of thing of the map, or from the standard side by side. I'm not sure exactly what I'll do next, but that's my plan. This may be an option that they can change to, because I kind of don't like the mini map. It takes up a lot of room, and on a tablet device, there's not working with a lot of real estate there on the screen. So, I'm not sure yet, but it works really well. And what's nice is that Unity, because to handle building things, all that happens is there's a tile object. So here's a tile object. Oops, that's a model. Sorry, I want the actual tile. There it is, tile. I just made a script for it, and if we actually look at this, there's some way to edit script. If we actually edit the script, look at the script, it has this mouse down function, and this is just something built into Unity, where as long as it has a collider object, so something that tells its physical shape, there's a mouse down function that gets fired when it's clicked on. And so in here I have some basic stuff where it builds up, sends a command to build a tank. But the thing is, with this mouse down function, that's all I had, and I was playing with these camera views, and I'm like, oh, this won't work. If I build my second camera view, it won't, I can't use that mini map because it's orthographic and it's not the actual main camera. But that was not how it worked out. So if I go back here and I host a game and then join a game over here, what you notice is that I can actually go in here and build using that, or click on that, and that was just instant. Like I had nothing, no programming changes, nothing to change my scripts at all. Just worked right out of the box, and so that's really cool that I just knew what to do. I was very pleasantly surprised. Anyway, so that's what's been done so far. I'm kind of in a design phase now where I'm working on units and stuff, because I have the big chunks of the programming done. I started right off with that lockstep stuff. I have that implemented, and now I'm moving on to artwork, concept designs. I realized that I basically need to catch up on my unit designs because there's some stuff that's missing, and so that's the next phase, is really going to move into that stuff. So right now I'm working on more concepts and maybe get like a little story hashed out for the game, because there's not really a story to it yet, but I can imagine some kind of silly story. Also UI, so there needs, at the moment there's no way to select a different type of unit. Like, it's just tied to left click will build that laser type unit. There's no way to build a helicopter or whatever else. So there's things like that need to be done. But yeah, so a lot's been done, but there's also plenty to do. And the season of Let's Make a Game is kind of starting a little bit late here, but it's not too bad. It's just going along. Yeah, and if you have any comments or questions or requests, I'm not really sure, feel free to post them on the Twitch TV or YouTube. I don't yet have a certain time frame I plan on doing these live casts, but I will make it apparent when I do. Probably most evenings. I'll see what happens. Yeah, so go ahead and subscribe if you're really interested in this and you want to keep following on to new videos. I guess to wrap up here, I'll talk about one other cool thing, which is the shaders I'm using. So let me go here, and let me turn on. There's a hidden laser guy here. So this is just my example object that I work on to build. So basically, what you in Unity, you build these things called prefabs, so prefabricated objects. And then you can do is have these prefabs kind of stored away, and then you can load them dynamically in the game. So you can say, build me this object, this prefab object at this position, or whatever else. And so that's how all the objects are created. There's a prefab for each one, and the prefab sets up all the parameters. Like, here's the lights on each of the, the units, or the cannons, and here's the two cannons, and here's the chassis, and whatever else. They have an audio source and stuff like that. Anyway. You'll notice here that it's changing the color. So this one's green, and this guy has a blue color to him, and that's because if you think about in Blender, let's go to this guy. Notice how he's all black. If you think about the game, we have red units and we have blue units for each type of unit, so they can have different colors. It would be a huge mistake to go in and say, let's make for each type of unit. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be a huge mistake. It'd be one way to do it. Would be to have for each unit a red texture and a blue texture. But think about like a game like StarCraft. If they have like 8 different types of colors, they have different different team colors. You'd have to have 8 separate textures for each unit in the world, right? Because you have to have a blue texture that's painted blue, and one that's painted red, and one that's painted pink, and one that's painted orange, or whatever else. And that doesn't make sense, because it's taking a lot of resources, and that would be a huge amount of space wasted. And if you had to edit a texture, you're like, oh, I don't want that shoulder pad painted on there, I want it over here. It's like, oh, well, let me go change the other 8 different copies of it. That's just not how it works. What you can do instead is do an active replacement. So what you do is you build 2 textures. There's one that's the base diffuse map, so it's the basic coloring of the object. That's how I'm working on this. That's how I handle this. If I go here into the actual... go to the models, and I go to my chassis, let's go to the hover chassis. Let's go to his material. So there's a chassis texture material. Here's the base diffuse texture. And for this case, it's all white. There's no color to it. It's just because this is the early. Let me go to a better one. Sorry. Let me open up my Gatling gun. Yeah, this guy's cool. Let me go to his material though. There's the Gatling material here. So he has a base texture, which is this simple texture I can open up over here. So you notice I painted on some really crummy looking barrels, and then there's the actual front of the barrel, and then this end forward and a little arrow on it, and so it's a very basic texture, and this gives it some basic color, right? And you notice there's these splotches in here and whatever else, because I'm kind of messy when I was painting. But that just paints on to this stuff. So you see the barrel lines. You can see that this way forward. This is actually mirrored because I'm sharing the UV around that whole thing. So it's kind of, if we go on this side, so I'm not used to this interface. It's upside down over here, but it's actually not mirrored. So this is this end forward over here. So what we see there is that this is the colors there. We're seeing that in there. Where does this blue come from? This is so there's not like a blue. You don't see blue painted in here on our textures, right? There's no blue in here. So here's actually where that blue part is in the middle. There's no blue there. The blue comes from a replacement texture. So here we have a replacement texture. Open this up, and look at this. This is very straight lines, very exact. That's because I wanted these to be perfect. They can't overlap from the other color. Now what happens is this replacement texture tells you what areas of the texture need to be replaced with a override color, with a replacement color. So this if we look at these, let me kind of pull them up side by side here. Yeah, okay, so put these side by side. You kind of imagine, here's the front of the barrel, that's right here on this one. That gets overridden with this black bar, and the same thing on this side. And then down here I have this big black box, and that kind of overlaps over here. So we can imagine these are kind of overlapped one another. What happens is in our shader, whenever there's whatever shade of black is there that gets multiplied by the color, or that becomes the color. So white areas in this texture will be their basic, will be the same color that shows up over here. So whatever's in the diffuse will be replaced in the white, but the black areas will be overridden with the team color. And then if it's like a shade of gray, it'll be a lighter version of the team color. It'll be a blending of the two. So the level between the shade of gray tells you how much to blend between the two. So I could have a light gray gray box down here, and that would make these barrels look a little bit blue or whatever the team color is. And so then, so there's a third parameter here on our shader. So here's the base texture that we saw, the diffuse. Then there's replacement texture, and here's the color that replaces. So if we click this, I can now change colors. You'll see that it's changing right in the viewport all the different colors I can have. So I can select different things. It's only replacing on those sections of the texture. So I can have it orange or something, or bright red or pink. And this is actually a very simple shader. So if you haven't been exposed to shaders, you need to get ready, because if you're making a 3D game, you're going to touch them at some point, and Unity could not make these easier. First of all, let's look at this. So if you noticed back here, there were those parameters. So, oh god, this is a mess. And you go up here. There. They have these three parameters. This is the base RGB, which is the texture, the diffuse texture, the replacement texture, and the color. So we may be asking, where do those come from? These are the user-definable settings that we can make in our editor. And to make those exposed in our shader, we have these simple properties collection here. So here's the shader. I give it a name. Say custom / color replacement. And this is how it shows up in the menu. So if I go back here and I click the shader menu to change the shader, there's a custom entry now, and there's a color replacement. And so that's where that came from. So the slashes just indicate levels in the menu subtree. Anyway, the first thing here are the properties. These are what is editable in the inside of the editor. So the main text is the name of the first one. It's like a it's like a variable name, I guess, for it. And then here's the display name. It says base RGB. 2D meaning it's an image, a 2D image. And then white is the default, so just an empty white texture is the default value. Then there's a replace texture. Here's the display name, again 2D. Default is again white. Down here's the color. This is the color we're going to replace, the team color. I'm just going to call it color. And then it's a color object set to 0001. So red, green, blue is all 0, so that means black. And then 1 is alpha. So it's non-transparent. It's completely opaque. Anyway, what Unity has are built-in surface shaders where we don't have to worry about the exact lighting model. And so we don't have to implement the entirety of the shader. We can just implement chunks that we want to override. So here's our subshader object. These things I'm not too familiar with yet. Level of detail, I'm not sure how that applies to anything. Render type is opaque because I'm assuming this is because this should be drawn because there's no transparency in the shader, so I can't have any semi-transparent objects inside of my game, and that's mostly for performance reasons, and just I don't have a need for it yet. If I think of a need for it, I'll deal with it later, but the really only thing that's going to have any transparency will be particles. But everything else will be opaque, so the units will all be opaque and whatever else. Then there's this Pragma Service Surf Wrap Lambert. Now, I was just messing around with this. This is taken directly from their website, and they're talking about there's this different lighting technique you can override called Wrap Lambert, which gives it kind of a fake subsurface scattering, so it kind of just makes it look like there's a bit more lighting in the area, not just from one direction of light. But there is a built-in one called just Lambert, the normal Lambert shading. If you're familiar with any graphics, you'll kind of understand Lambert's a lighting model that defines how objects should be lit. So basically, this the standard Lambert. If I get rid of, I can actually get rid of this code. there's a built-in lighting model called Lambert that just knows how to shade your objects using the lights in the scene that you set up in the editor. Then what we can do is, the only thing really I want to override is the color of the object. I don't really want to worry about how it's lit, because otherwise, if you've ever written a shader just from scratch, you have to write the full shader. You have to write how it's going to be lit, where to keep track of where the lights are and whatever else, and you do all these things. What Unity does, it gives you these surface shader objects, and then you can just override the coloring of it. So I have a method called surf. So here's my little surf function. Again, you see here our sampler2d main text, sampler2d replace text, and uniform half-3 color. These are all this is the main texture, the placement texture, and the color. This is how I refer to it inside the shader. So you have to declare them here as well as up here. It doesn't know to automatically put these in here because you may want to have different settings on them. Anyway, so this is how we refer to the user-defined property. So now the sampler2d will actually refer to the diffuse texture that the user, or that I specified, and same thing with replacement. Anyway, what it exposes, though, when you use surface shaders is this input structure, and then in this input structure you want to specify what things you need to override. So one of the things, there's a list online, I can't point you to it directly, but if you Google Unity surface shaders, you'll come across it. The only thing I really need to know about is the UVs on the object. I need the main texture UVs, and so I can specify this field here, and this will automatically be filled in with the proper UV coordinates for the object. Then in my surface actual function here, I have the input object, so this input structure is being passed in. And all I have to do is spit out the specific surface output type. And so the surface output type defines the surface coloring, and it's what the various lighting models will use to actually do the proper lighting. So the only thing I'm doing is I'm first grabbing the color from the main texture, so the diffuse texture, so main text, using that UV coordinate that was passed in from the input. Then I get the grayscale value. So this grayscale is not really a good, I should call this like mix or something. But this is the level of grayness on our replacement texture. So I'm using replacement texture saying get that same exact UV coordinate in the replacement texture, and just give me the red channel. That's because I'm expecting that replacement texture to just be black and white. I don't really care about the other channels, so I'm just going to grab the red channel because they'll all be the same. And this will tell me, this float value here will be between 0 and 1, and it will tell me how much I should apply the team color, how much it should be overridden from the base texture. So all I had to do down here is set in this surface output has an albedo, or albedo, whatever you want to say, field to it. And we just need to set this to the color of the object. So I'm saying take the original color in the diffuse map, multiply it by the grayscale value. So again, note that if the grayscale value is 1, so that means that the color in the texture is white. So if it's a white pixel in that texture, then this grayscale value would be 1. And remember, we said that white should just be the original base diffuse map. We don't want any, but black means replace this section with the team color entirely. So this becomes the basic color from the texture times 1, so it retains that whole thing. Then we take the team color, we add to that, we take the team color, and we multiply that by 1 minus the grayscale. So if it's a white, this becomes 0. Oops, this becomes 0. Zoom in here so you can actually see, hopefully. This becomes 0, and now we don't get any of that color from the team. Again, the alpha just maintains whatever's in the diffuse, but there really shouldn't be an alpha. It should always be 1.0. So there's that. So that's how it gets the color. So this says just keep wherever it's white inside of our replacement map. Just keep it the normal diffuse map color. But if it's purely black, then this red channel comes back as 1.0, meaning our grayscale here is 1.0, meaning or 0. Sorry, it comes as 0. So meaning this becomes 0. So we're not using it at all. We're not using any of the diffuse color. Then we're going to use 100% of the replacement color because it goes 1 minus 0, which becomes just the color, the replacement color. So that's how it becomes purely blue. And again, the alpha maintains the alpha from the diffuse map. So that's how this color gets there. So since I had pure black on here, it becomes purely pink. It becomes purely pink wherever that pure black was. Notice the lighting changed a little bit. That's because I undid those changes in the shader. So watch this. So notice how it's darker around the edges here. It's kind of it's a little uglier because there's only one light and there's some darkness up here. So if I go back here, I'm just going to undo those changes. So I'm going to apply my wrap Lambert function now, which I just stole off their website. And I drag it back here. It's going to automatically recompiling. And then boom, we see it's a bit more. It's because the shading now is the lighting is distributed more, or it's simulated to be distributed more. and I really like that. It looks good for this game. I may shift to actually a toon shader. I'm not sure. I feel like it's a little abused. I did that in my original game. It had toon shader and the outlining and all that, but and the toon shading basically it just means there's not really a gradient to shading. There's a it's a harsh color change. So it's like you'll have your white and then it'll be like a dark gray. If you played any cell shading is another name for it, and I can't think of a game recently, but I guess Borderlands kind of has the toon shading to it. Also, outlining is where it puts an outline around all the objects, like a black outline. It's kind of a cool effect, and this game is kind of cartoony, but I may leave it off for now. That's something to play with later, though, because that won't really be affected by anything. Anyway, so that's how this pink gets there. It's bright pink. It's kind of cool. So if I wanted to make it less harsh pink, I wanted to mix it in with the other colors. What I could do is, let's try this really quick. Let's go. Let me open up here the. I'm going to go to assets, I can go to models, and then weapons. Let's go to the Gatling 1 replace. So here's the replacement map for the Gatling 1. What if I want just a little bit of pink on the barrel? What I can do here is let's just draw a horizontal section here. And let me take a kind of a grayish color, and I'll just paint it in there. And now I'll extract this, or export this to the replace again. Replace it, export. Now if I go back into Unity, now we see that there's this pink patch on it. But notice that it's not completely overriding the other colors. That's because it's a gray. If I made that a black patch, then it would be just purely pink there. You wouldn't see anything. But we can see here, I don't know if you could tell on the stream, hopefully it's high res enough that you can see that there's actually a lighter gray. You can still see the barrel highlights from it. But then there's this little pink patch over the whole thing, which works out pretty well. Let me go back here and undo that because I really don't want that. And then I'll export that again, and then I'll close it. So if I take that away, oops, let me pop back in Unity, it's gone. And what's really nice again about Unity is it just reloads things. I can just edit it, and it will be there. So yeah, so that's the basic structure for this stuff. I can make it black if I want to, gray. Anyway, I'm just having